Hello, and welcome back to Videocast 9, Part 2. Actually, this is an excellent example in real time to see how Anthony has to handle external circumstances that come at him suddenly. And we had to abruptly end Part 1 of our Videocast 9 as a result. So now that Anthony's back, let's find out what happened.
Absolutely. So as you know, we have a very large parking area in the back. There is a group that is performing a very large renovation at Morgan Stanley, which is around the corner from here. They asked to use a portion of our back parking area, which would be totally obstructed. In the back, no one would be able to see it. They wanted to put up a storage unit. The building department came and just shut them down. As a result, they were downstairs wanting to let us know that they need to go and amend their permit to be able to file for a storage unit back there. We don't anticipate there being a problem, but again, these are the type of things that you deal with in terms of local enforcement code, whether it be from the local building department on an issue, or a health department who comes in and wants to make sure that you're up to date with all of your regulations, particularly with COVID restrictions, if any. And these are just the type of things that from a small business owner perspective that you're constantly dealing with all of these outside forces while also trying to maintain your business.
Right.
So, you know, we dealt with it. It'll be resolved hopefully by tomorrow. But again, these are the things that take you away and will sometimes take your concentration away from what's important. I go back to a few weeks ago when we talked about on the eve of a rehearsal dinner, we had a water main break.
Yes.
And you know, figuring out being able to once again compartmentalize the issues and sitting there and being able to know who to call in your Rolodex to get that done so that the night can be successful.
That's right.
Same holds true here. We don't want to be in a situation where in any violation. We want to make sure the issue is resolved. They're able to use that portion of the parking area so that they could have a staging area, a storage shed area for their project around the corner. Again, Morgan Stanley is a tremendous customer of ours. So we do whatever we can to try to accommodate those around us.
But once again, I think in this case, too, your background in law and business and politics and so forth came to the rescue, and you were able to quite efficiently, I think, handle it in a very short amount of time. I mean, you knew what the regulations were. You know all this stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
So and you know how to deal with these people. Am I
absolutely
correct?
And the company that's doing the renovation at Morgan Stanley is a very large company. They too are well versed in what they need to do from a regulation perspective.
Right.
But it takes you off course, and as you can see, that's what happens.
Absolutely. And speaking of course, in the real estate financing arena, what kinds of things have been taking you off course?
Well, look, you always want to make, whenever a deal consummates, you know, the expectation is that the borrower will perform. But there are always going to be circumstances where you're in the middle of something that was unforeseen, where a person's business maybe didn't perform the way they thought it was, and as a result, they weren't maybe able to make a payment, and the loan may get into default. And so you have to be able to weigh the equities in terms of how do you proceed? Do you take a very rigid approach and immediately want to start a foreclosure proceeding or a default proceeding, or in the alternative, do you sit there and say, recognize the circumstances, recognize what your remedies are and how long it takes you from a lender's perspective to adequately exercise your remedies, and you say to yourself, you know, there may be a middle ground here that we can work towards making sure that this deal eventually does come to a successful completion.
Right.
Meaning the loan is paid back in full.
Right.
But there are circumstances where it just becomes untenable, and as a result, you have to take all of your legal remedies into account, exercise them,
Right.
and go down that road, which right now is not an easy road if you're involved in it, because of the moratoriums in place when it comes to whether it be an eviction or a foreclosure proceeding.
Right, exactly. Well, so I'm wondering that, it sounds to me like your other businesses really spread you thin and add a lot of additional stress to your life when this restaurant already is a quite stressful enterprise. Can you talk about that?
It does. It definitely has an adverse effect on my time. That's my biggest issue. If I had to say that, if there was one issue, it would be the time that my is certainly limited as a result of being involved in all of these different prospective companies. The stress side of it, for whatever reason, I'm able to manage stress well. I've had a long history of it, so I'm able to juggle a lot of different balls and give each. I try to compartmentalize issues and make sure that I give each matter the attention it deserves. And when it needs to be heightened, I certainly make sure that it's heightened, whether it be here on a Saturday evening or on a random Tuesday dealing with a potential client who may be having a problem with a prospective borrowing circumstance. So, I'm able to manage my time well in that perspective. And I think that goes towards my years as being involved in management, and whether it be from managing a campaign or whether I was being, involved in a chief of staff position that was, juggling a lot of balls in the air.
So then to swing more toward what attracts you to all of this side, we know it is stressful. We know it's spreading you thin. We know it's adding a great deal of stress to your plate, but it's also fulfilling you in all kinds of ways. Can you talk about that and even go back to, I think I'm remembering in a conversation you and I had early on about growing up and the messages that you received, which are a little bit counter to what you've come to believe you need today?
I think it starts from my parents always making sure that we were, working and making sure that at the end we were responsible, and also just from a self-fulfilling issue, wanting to be relevant and wanting to take my skill set and make sure that I am doing more than just running a restaurant. In some sense, I guess it's a self-doubt issue, right? In terms of wanting to make sure that I know that at the end of the day, I did more than just run a restaurant. I was able to take my skill set and do what I really enjoy doing in terms of real estate, taking this hemp business and knowing the medicinal benefits and hopefully societal benefits of what I think the plant will bring. I think that that's self-fulfilling for me, but it also checks another box from I guess, I maybe use the word ego. That everyone has, and you want to make sure that you're successful in doing it, so you fight like hell to make sure it gets done. And that's very true here in this business. So many people had doubt, when we first decided we were going to open this, knowing that I never had any experience in the restaurant business.
Right, sure.
I know it scared the hell out of my parents. I could tell you that. I remember the first day they walked in here when we were doing the renovation. Just, it's hard to sit there and look at somebody who never was involved in the restaurant and say, go get it.
What's wrong with just owning A restaurant.
Yeah, no, it's some
That's
people
really
some people
interesting.
would say that, and I understand it. I guess it's just a will on my side to again touch a lot of different areas of my interest, and want to ultimately be successful in each of those industries. Trying to learn it and learn it to a point where I understand it as well as I possibly can, and I want to succeed, in it. So I guess it's internal. It's an internal clock in me that it's hard for me to shut down.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if I understand from our original conversation correctly, that this innate desire for diversity that you're talking about was not necessarily encouraged when you were growing up, and that you feel, in fact, it's very, very important to be able to be involved in all kinds of areas that you're interested in, and obtain this broad perspective. And I think you had felt that growing up, you were kind of
rigid,
laser focused on one thing or another thing, and not really encouraged to explore all the aspects of self.
Correct.
That you are it seems to me looking to do now.
Right. Well, I mean, look, it was very different. It was back then. It was, you go to school, you figure out your major, and whatever that major is, you go into it and you stay in that, and you did great. You completed what you were supposed to.
Right.
That just never was satisfying enough for me. So I always wanted to look at different alternatives. And I did that, whether it was when I was practicing law and being involved in politics and being involved in real estate deals, even from that time, very early on in my career.
Right.
I always tried to be involved in a lot of different things that had particular interest to me. And I feel like at this particular moment, I'm checking all those boxes because I'm satisfying those desires internally.
Which is fantastic.
Correct.
Now, how does all this come together? For example, and this might be, I think, interesting for our viewers to understand your thought process when you contemplate a new venture. At some point in the timeline, you were considering a second restaurant. And of course, my jaw just dropped open thinking, is there a space between Saturday and Sunday? And I was, totally floored, but fascinated with your thought process and your analysis. And I think it would be interesting to share that and see where you came out after that process.
So there was, if I were to figure out another restaurant, it would be because I feel that we have shown the ability to be successful here at this location. Mm-hmm. And there was an opportunity east of here. I don't want to give the exact location, but it was, again, another circumstance where it's been a restaurant for nearly 35 years. And I always like to look at those situations where this restaurant that we took over here has been a restaurant for over 100 years.
Right. Wow.
So when I and I think I sent you an old photo of what it was years and years and years ago when it was just called the Hilltop. And from my perspective, I look at that as a track record of success that had nothing to do whatsoever with me. None whatsoever. And I sat there and I say that the community had supported that location as a restaurant for over 100 years. I have to screw it up really bad in order to make sure that they don't do it again. And that's the thought process that went through my head. And when this other opportunity arose, I immediately started to look at the comparisons between this location and that location. Standalone building, track record of years of community support, track record of success for a prolonged period of time. and looked at the opportunity that there may be some financial disarray at that location now as a result of COVID, and felt there was an opportunity there to go in. Had the fortunate offer of a separate restaurant just this past summer in West Hampton. It was West Hampton Beach. We took a pass on it because we realized logistically that we wouldn't be able to staff it, and knowing where we are with the staffing shortage. But this was an opportunity that was a restaurant for 70 years, and the owners were just moving on. I think one of the owners had succumbed to COVID, and they just wanted to move on, and they needed to unload it, and it was brought to me by a landlord. So I was extraordinarily happy with that potential opportunity. I looked into it. I was excited about it. But then when I just looked at my calendar, as you just said, that there's only so much time.
Wow.
And more importantly, this is easy for me in terms of, I don't use the word easy lightly. It's located in my neighborhood. I could be here in 7 minutes from where I live. The other location that I was looking at, I could be there in 15 minutes. You know, when you have a building department problem and you're 2 hours away, it's a little bit more difficult to manage. So just looked at it from a logistics standpoint, and I said we're not going to be able to do that opportunity. It would be too much of a burden. But this other opportunity, which was relatively close by, excited me because I understood looked at the analogies of this location and that location, looked at the track record of success, knew what I would be able to bring in there in terms of knowing the talent that I like to have on my team and bringing that perspective there. I thought would have been very successful. Maybe the opportunity will arise again, I don't know. But for purposes of right now, just sticking with this location.
For the moment. But it sounds like your antenna are always up, so to speak, ready to pick up potential opportunities that seem very interesting to you. Would that be accurate to say?
Absolutely. You know, I think it's something that has been, again, it's an entrepreneurial spirit, maybe. I do a lot of reading and research, particularly on areas that are interesting to me. So when I see them, I tend to be a little bit more aggressive in delving further into, is there an opportunity available? And again, it's never something that you do in a shotgun approach.
Exactly.
There's been certain development opportunities, particularly in this raging real estate market that we're seeing right now. And every time it's careful thought process in terms of what it will bring. How do we structure the deal so that we have an out in the event it doesn't come to fruition? And that's how I tend to look at all opportunities, whether it's a restaurant or a real estate deal or a lending opportunity. Try to figure out the outs in the event of the world, as they say, the sky is falling.
Well, it sounds like a very highly disciplined approach that you are careful not to veer from.
Yes.
Even in your excitement about the potential of the opportunity, you still come back to the approaches that you have found to be important and successful. And that kind of brings us full circle to the restaurant, how you have always maintained your philosophies and approaches and held fast to your core values no matter what was happening, good
Correct.
or bad.
But it started earlier than that. It started at the inception of ultimately opening and entering into the agreement to operate here. We had built in an escape clause, so to speak, in terms of we had negotiated an option to buy the building.
Right.
The landlord did not want to give it. He wanted to give what was known as a right of first refusal. And I had said to him that it wasn't particularly inviting to me because I didn't want to have a situation where we built up this business at this location and then he tells me that the price somebody gave him was dramatically higher than what the market conditions were. So we kind of met in the middle on a term where I agreed to an option price back in 2010
Right.
that I would be able to exercise now. And it was certainly in my favor to do that. And the landlord certainly did not want me to exercise the option.
Right.
Ultimately, we did, but I always felt that the real estate location is in the heart of Purchase, which is still a tremendous community. The real estate prices have only increased since 2010, and I felt that if I was able to have them agree to an option price based on 2010 values that allowed me to exercise it in
Right.
2020, it would certainly inure to my benefit in the event that I wanted to sell the business. I would have that as an additional asset to the business.
Yes.
So that when you sell a business, you sell it with the lease in place. We had a long-term lease at the time. And I would be able to tell a prospective purchaser that you're not only buying the business, but you're buying the lease, which has a built-in option that you can exercise to acquire the real estate. And to me, that was very important, because you don't want to spend 25 years building up a business and then turn around and the landlord say your lease is expired. What do you really own at that point? And that happens more often than you could imagine, where business owners, not just restaurateurs, but business owners, own a business for 30 years. They are at a particular location, and a landlord decides to triple their rent.
Exactly.
And they say, I have to close, but this guy, well, look what he did to me. And I sit there and I say, yeah, but you had 30 years run and you had your business there, and that's an unfortunate circumstances, but that was foreseeable. You knew the end was coming. That's within his right to raise the rent as dramatically as he wants, or in the alternative, not agree to lease to you again. And so we were able to foresee that, and we looked at that as our ultimate out plan in the event that we wanted to sell, that we knew we had that as a built-in asset, the option.
It's fascinating. And we thank you for kind of bringing us into the inner workings of these kinds of considerations and analyses involved in both existing and new businesses.
Yes.
So for our final videocast next week, we are going to delve into Anthony's internal landscape. And I'll be digging around all throughout and really giving us an even deeper and richer understanding of you. And then we will take a look ahead at what Anthony envisions for himself in the future. So please make sure you stay with us for our final videocast next week. And I encourage you to, if you missed any of the videocasts up until this point, to go back, do a Netflix kind of type binge. It's absolutely fascinating. And thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.